the great Peter King of NBC Sports. And Peter, I'm going to ask you the question. If Kyler Murray sees what's going on in baseball, this kind of contract, even though he's completed his pro day last week, teams say, or speculations that he's rising up the draft boards. How could he just look at that contract and say, you know what, I'm still all in with football?
Well, Kirk, it's a great question, but I guess the point I would make is that Kyler Murray, when he went to Oklahoma,
right,
and he played baseball, he was obviously a top prospect and a very good prospect. But to compare, even though he was the 9th pick in the MLB draft last year, but to compare his future possibility in baseball to football, I think is probably really taking a giant leap of faith toward baseball for this reason. Okay, like he played a lot in 1 year. Okay, so like his first year that he played at Oklahoma, he only had 49 at bats. And he didn't play a lot. He only hit 122. That was 2017. The reason I know this is that I looked it up and I was really, really surprised that, okay, so his big baseball year at Oklahoma in the spring of 2018, a year ago, okay, his big baseball season, he batted 296. And he played every day. He played all the time, but he batted 296. He had all this speed. He stole 10 bases, and he hit 10 home runs. And I'm not saying that's bad at all. I'm really not. But he played 50-something games, and I'm just making the point that Kyler Murray was taken by the Oakland A's because they thought that if he devoted all his time to baseball, that he had a very good chance to be a very good player. But honestly, there were no guarantees whatsoever about Kyler Murray in baseball. You watch him in football, and other than the fact he's 5'10" and an eighth, other than that, it's kind of hard to believe that anybody could have any real doubts about whether he'll make it or not. I don't have many. And again, who knows? Anything could happen. But I think he looks at this and he likes football more. So I don't know why the Mike Trout contract today would have him putting his thinking cap on and say, I've made a terrible mistake by picking football. I don't think in any way is he saying that.
No, I don't think so as well. I think he's positioned himself quite well, Peter. But just when you see those dollar figures, you're like, oh, my God. But it still goes to show that the NFL is a quarterback-driven league. And Kyler Murray will be drafted at some point in the draft, whether it's number 1 overall or top 5, first round, I think for sure. But I think about another guy who was drafted pretty high a couple of years ago by the Jacksonville Jaguars and Blake Bortles. Now, people thought he would be, a guy who would kind of each year get better and better. Started in the AFC Championship game, and now reports that he will be the backup to Jared Goff. Now, I know you spent a ton of time with Sean McVay, especially on the ride to work with him before. What makes this signing for Blake Bortles to the Los Angeles Rams, what makes this a good signing for them?
His first year with the Rams, 2017, I remember going to training camp and watching Sean McVay work with the quarterbacks. And at the time, I thought that there was a chance that Jared Goff really might not be that good. But I saw the time that he was investing every practice, every day with the quarterbacks. Dan Orlovsky was in camp. He ended up not making it. Sean Mannion was there, the Oregon State quarterback, and Goff, and I'm sure there were 1 or 2 other guys. But Sean McVay was coaching those guys like every day and, like throughout most of practice. And it was just Sean McVay is this is a perfect place. And I would say this if it were almost any quarterback, but especially for Blake Bortles, who has been damaged badly who has had one really positive, significant kind of extended blip on his radar, and that was sort of maybe in the last 2 months of the 2017 season, where, if Stephon Gilmore doesn't make the great acrobatic play
Right.
in breaking up that pass in the last couple of minutes of that game, Bortles could have led them to the winning touchdown and a Super Bowl berth, and he never would have been cut. They probably would have signed him long term. But, to a contract that really meant something. But I just think that he's going to get the most individual attention. Hey, it's like going to play football for Andy Reid.
Right.
Or Sean Payton. You go to one of those guys, or Kyle Shanahan, you go to one of those guys and you fail, it is on you.
We're talking to NBC Sports' Peter King joining the Rich Eisen show. Kirk Morrison filling in for Rich. And Peter, I remember seeing Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think a couple years ago. I was down at Tampa Bay Buccaneers training camp, and he's one of my old teammates, my quarterback when I was with the Buffalo Bills. And I said, Ryan, we're the same draft class. Why are you still playing? Like, what? He's like, Kirk, I keep trying to retire, but they keep dragging me out of retirement. He's like, I can't turn down this kind of money. And I say that because the Miami Dolphins signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I'm thinking, is this for real, or is this a situation where they need a placeholder for right now to kind of get this team turned over and they're looking almost not toward the 2019 season, but what could be ahead in 2020? Basically, Peter, that's my way of them saying that this is an easier way to say that we're not tanking, but we're actually tanking. Like, what's the deal with the signing of Fitzpatrick to Miami?
I mean, it's almost like he was the last competent quarterback left standing. And what choice did the Miami Dolphins really have? But, I wrote this Monday in my column, Kirk, that, if you got to be careful with this because I desperately am against tanking.
Right.
I think it's stupid. I think it's an insult to the people who pay money to go to your games. I live in New York. I don't know how much a ticket to see the Knicks costs, but I assume it's a monstrous amount of money. And basically, the Knicks are putting a product out on the floor that, if you gave James Dolan sodium pentothal, he would say, I hope we lose. And I want to get the first pick in the draft because I want Zion Williamson. It's a heinous, ridiculous way to operate. However, the one thing that the Miami Dolphins have to be concerned with more than everything else is getting their long-term quarterback of the future. Let's say they don't think they can get Kyler Murray, and I don't think they can. And let's say that either they don't love Dwayne Haskins or they don't think they can get him, and they're not in love with any of these other guys. They, whoever, Daniel Jones, whatever it is.
Right.
So let's say all those things are the case. Then the Miami Dolphins need to make sure that whether it's in free agency, unlikely, or the draft in 2020, they're in the best possible position to get the best quarterback they can. And that, to me, has to be their first, second, and third goal of the 2019 season because in the NFL, you're never going to win unless you have a highly competitive quarterback. So that's what I wonder about right now with Miami. Did Miami go a little bit soft on Teddy Bridgewater because they weren't really sure about him because I don't know how you can be. He hasn't played in a while, and even when he played, I didn't know if he was a franchise quarterback. So did they go a little soft on Bridgewater because they weren't convinced about him, or because they don't? Why would they want to go 7-9? I mean, that just puts them further away from getting their quarterback next year. So at some point, you got to bite the bullet and say, we're going to do everything we can to get our quarterback in the next 2 years. I believe that's Miami's biggest goal right now.
He's the host of the Peter King podcast. He's Peter King of NBC Sports, joining the Rich Eisen show. Kirk Morrison filling in for Rich. Peter, hear me out here, because I kind of came to this epiphany yesterday. I was thinking about, over the last couple of days being here in Los Angeles and, what's going on with LeBron James and all of his extra things he's got off the court. And so, he has this show called The Shop that's on HBO, and you've seen some NFL players on there. And for some reason, I was thinking about it yesterday, right, Peter? And I think it's been 3 NFL players who have been on the show. And the 3 NFL players who actually went on the show were on different teams after they got off the show, which were Antonio Brown, who we know has been traded from Pittsburgh to Oakland. Odell Beckham, who was on episode 1, he's been traded from New York. Now he goes over to Cleveland. And Michael Bennett, who was a Philadelphia Eagle, is no longer an Eagle.
Yeah.
He is now with the New England Patriots. So is there something now where NFL players are seeing that they've got a little bit more power than they probably didn't know that they had in years past? Because we've seen a lot more movement, I feel like, this free agency in terms of trades and guys kind of getting, different deals other places.
Look, Michael Bennett didn't do anything of a disruptive nature to get traded out of Philadelphia. I think that the Eagles wanted to use his money on other people.
Right.
But both Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham Jr. were disruptive factors at times, certainly on their teams. And in fact, I believe Antonio Brown did that to get out. Odell Beckham Jr., I don't know whether he did or not, but he certainly was disruptive at times. Drew Rosenhaus was on my podcast last week, and he talked about this exact thing. He said, I would hope that if there's one thing that was accomplished with the Antonio Brown story over a long period of time, 2 or 3 months, that it is that if you're in a situation you don't like and you're willing to take some risky and potential image damaging consequences, you can get out of where you are. Now, not every team is going to accommodate you. I am convinced, Kirk,
yes,
that if the Cleveland Browns did not put Jabril Peppers in that trade package for Odell Beckham, that Beckham would not have been traded. And I was told that absolutely. So I mean, we're all saying that, well, Odell got what he wanted. He got out of New York for whatever reason. I don't know why somebody who, loves the fashion scene goes to Paris and sits on runways and whatever. It's bizarre to me that he would be making noise and seemingly being a disruptive factor with the Giants. But be that as it may, he's out of New York now, and I think part of the reason is that he was a squeaky wheel. It's the same thing as Antonio Brown. But, Kirk, I think if players are going to do that and if they want to do that, they have to be willing to be very strong and to take an incredible amount of public acrimony, fan hatred, all that kind of stuff for that to work. If they're not willing to be unpopular, then they're going to have to suck it up and stay on the teams where they are.
Oh, you said the word unpopular, which kind of leads me to my next question, Peter. An unpopular player was kind of sacrificed yesterday, and that unpopular player would be Vontaze Burfict. He was released by the Cincinnati Bengals. Zach Taylor, new head coach, comes in and talks and says, hey, it's kind of a mutual agreement almost that it's better for him to get a fresh start and us as the Cincinnati Bengals get a fresh start. There will be a market, I feel, for Vontaze Burfict. Obviously, one of the leading candidates says, oh, he looks like a Raider, plays on a Raider. What would that dynamic look like with Vontaze Burfict, Antonio Brown? And we know the history between those two, between the Bengals and Steelers. But if the Raiders were to sign Vontaze Burfict, can we just sign a petition that we want the Raiders as Hard Knocks for this season, please? Let's just go ahead and start the petition now, Peter, because that is must-see TV in a summer in which we love access. How great would that be? The Raiders, all their deals, Antonio Brown and Vontaze Burfict.
What I think would be really interesting about that, and that's the first thing I thought of is, and I don't know the answer to this question. I should, but I don't. Mm-hmm. John Gruden has great regard for his defensive coordinator, Paul Guenther. Paul Guenther obviously had been in Cincinnati.
Right.
And had coached Vontaze Burfict for several years. I do not know if Guenther is telling Gruden, hey, listen, let's take this guy, give him a prove-it contract, and if it works out, he'll be a really good player for us, and if not, we just let him go. That's the thing, Kirk, you know this,
right,
because you had to deal with it. In the NFL, if you don't give a guy a lot of guaranteed money, and you sign him in April, let's say, okay, you don't have to pay him anything other than expenses until Labor Day. It's a free look. Imagine this. Imagine having Vontaze Burfict around your team for 5 months for free, basically. And again, for free, I mean, I'm talking about what you have to pay a guy in training camp, all that other stuff.
Yeah, the per diem that we got. The little per diem that we got.
But players don't start getting paid their regular salaries until week 1 of the NFL season.
Right.
So in other words, if you signed Vontaze Burfict, let's say the Raiders did this, okay? I mean, if you sign him today, you do not have to pay him a salary for almost 6 months. And that's why I think that if Paul Guenther went in and told Gruden, hey, let's give it a shot, what do we have to lose? There is nothing to lose. And so let's say you've got to give him some little guarantee, and I say little, but say you got to give him $100,000 to sign. He's not going to make a lot of money, I wouldn't think, in any guarantees because everybody's afraid of him, and rightfully so. But I think he'd be an interesting gamble for some team to take because when he plays, he is a top third impact linebacker in the league. But there's so much other crap around him that I wouldn't guarantee him anything. I would have him on the team, and I would basically say, look, as long as everything works out, as long as you're here working hard and you play well and you don't have all this crap that has accompanied you in the past, you're going to be a really good part of our team. Per week roster bonuses, blah, blah, blah. But once that other stuff starts, you got to get rid of them. That's the way I do it with them.
So that's a yes on Hard Knocks, right, Peter?
Oh, I'd love to. Come on. It'd be Hey, listen, I would love the Raiders on Hard Knocks, whether Vontaze Burfict was there or not. I think it'd be fantastic.
All good. All is well. But hey, appreciate the time, Peter, always. Thank you.
No problem. Kirk enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you. That was Peter King of NBC Sports.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.